You might have noticed that we are in the month of All Hallows Eve, otherwise known as Halloween. Originally, it was the Celtic festival of Samhain, where people lit bonfires, got dressed up and warded off all the spooky ghosts. Being as it's an appropriate time of year, I thought we would have a go at drawing some of the characters in Vincent and the Vampires. I'll show you how to do it and then you can have a go. And you can use them to give your Halloween decorations a very customised feel. Hello my old bean! If you haven't been here before then welcome. I'm Jules, I write and illustrate children's books, and when I'm not doing that I make videos on drawing, planning and publishing, and when I'm not doing that I make gluten-free cakes that I can pop straight into the compost bin because they're so disgusting. You can either sit back and relax with a chocky bicky, or you can fetch your pencil and your paper and come and draw with me. I'm using watercolour paper and my mechanical pencil to just start filling in those shapes for the little bat Vincent and his feet at the bottom. And as you can see, underneath his chin, his tummy meets up with one of his wings, and one ear is bigger than the other, and one eye is bigger than the other, and one nostril is bigger than the other. So using my fine liners, I've got here a 0.6 stapler. I'm going to use a thinner one for doing the finer details, but this is great for the outline, the majority of the outline. So then in with the thinner one, and then going round and round and round his bigger eye to give it a bit of definition. The pupils are quite close to one another, and he has one little vampire tooth sticking out, which I'm going to be very careful not to get any colour on so that it stands out from the rest of his body. And some little nails on the bottom of his feet, and that just shows the inside of his ear. So this is just water. I'm just wetting the paper, and you might be able to see it's not completely covering the area because I do want to have some little white patches. So it's just acting as a carrier for the pigment. On this first layer of pigment, I'm going in with a sort of very palish purple, and then starting to do a few more details around the edge with that darker blue. It's not quite French ultramarine, but it's a pretty darkish sort of a navy, or a cross between navy and royal blue. And you can see, because the paper is so wet, it's actually letting the paint move freely, and that's what creates the lovely effects. And then making round his eyes darker, just dotting that colour in, going back in with a wet brush that has no paint on it at all, and just smoothing that out, and that gives you the lovely dark edge and then the diffused look. And this is just a little bit of pink, magenta, and like I did before, I'm just putting the plain pigment that's straight out of the paint pot or the pan straight onto the paper, and then diffusing it with water. I'm just dotting water over the top of it and moving a little bit of paint around, but really just letting the paint move in the direction that it wants to go in. And I'm just repeating the process for this wing, and the reason why I left this and didn't do it all in one go is because I didn't want the paint from the face to merge with the paint from the wing and vice versa, because I want them to show that this wing is behind his face. And the way you do that is to make sure there is a little teeny tiny gap. As you can see, there's a tiny white gap there, and that just shows what is in the foreground and what is in the background. Moving on to the vampire, and he has quite a long face and these long eyes with big bushy eyebrows. And in the story he starts off being quite a scary character, but ends up actually being a very benign, lovely friend for Vincent. He wears this big cloak, and he's got underneath it, he's got a suit on, so he's holding the cloak open with his hands, and you can just see his suit jacket underneath and his trousers. So again, I'm going to use the same technique. I'm using the thicker pen, which is 0.6 I think, for doing the majority of the outlines, and then the thinner pen will be doing the details. You don't have to make the lines all neat and be very conformed and uniform. You can just let your pen be a bit scribbly, and that gives it a lot more character than if you are trying very hard to be neat and tidy. And then this one I'm going to just use for doing his pupils, his teeth, and any other, the little dots around his eyes as well, that show that he's tired, because I think vampires get tired, don't they? They're up all night. Okay, so this is my very lovely paint palette that I've had. I won a competition when I was at university, and it gave me £100 to spend on supplies, and I bought this very lovely artist quality set of paints, and I've had to replace the pans over time, but generally this is what I've always used. And I'm just mixing up there some skin tone for him. I've used a bit of yellow, a little bit of the reddy orange colour, and a tiny bit of magenta. If you want to make it a bit lighter, then you use a bit more water, and if you want to make it a bit darker, then you might mix a little bit of Van Dyke brown or maybe a dark ochre into that colour. And I'm doing the same process of wetting the paper before I drop in some colour, and then when I've got enough colour on his suit, so I'm going to put a little bit dark where I think the shadow is forming, so up the top, right up the top there, and then when I'm happy with how much shadow I've got and how much pigment I've got, I'm going to wash my brush out very thoroughly and just drop water. So you can see, I'll do the same the other side, and you can see on that left side how the water now spreads out and spreads that pigment, giving it a nice texture. Makes it a bit more interesting to look at than just a flat colour. And there again, dotting that water to make the texture. So I'm going to leave the trousers for a moment because I want that to dry a little bit. I am instead going to make a black. So I have here the orangey colour, that dark green, mix those together to make a brown, and then I'm going to put a little bit of blue in there, and that makes a black. So you can of course use a black straight, a tube or a pan of black, but it gives a much more interesting depth of colour if you make your own black up. Great way is to mix that green and red, and then if you haven't got that quite dark enough, just pop in a little bit of that dark blue, and that makes it makes a really good black, a reddy black or a greeny black, depending on how much you put in. So next, I think I'm going to do the trousers because that's probably pretty much dried now, and I'm just doing the same format that I've done with the jacket, making sure that the jacket is dry enough that it doesn't bleed into the trousers, and vice versa, that the water from the trousers doesn't make any difference to the edge of the jacket there. This blue also makes quite a good colour for making shadows, so on the white of his shirt and his ruff that he's got around his neck, I'm going to use that for showing that has a bit of form to it as well. Then dotting the water on it. And now I'm going to start the cloak, which is purple. I'm not going to do the bits that are nearest to the trousers at the moment because I don't want those two to mix. I'm just going to be very carefully making sure that I work around the areas that I don't want to get any of this purple on. I don't want to get any on his skin, and I don't want it to merge into the blue either. So that inside bit that I'm working on at the moment is going to be darker because the light's not hitting it, and make those inner bits much darker. And I did realise as I was sitting here doing it that I haven't drawn, there's a couple of lines missing on the bottom of his cloak that show that it goes round the back of him, because at the moment it just looks like there are two bits of fabric hanging off his shoulders and nothing round the back. So I will put that in, and then those little bits, the inside of his cloak, will be darker. On the original drawings, when I'd finished the painting, I went over the colour with a thin fine liner to make a squiggly pattern, but I'm going to leave that out today and just do the painting part. It's really important to keep your paper wet, so if you think that if you started to work on an area and you think another area has started to dry out, put some plain water back onto it, because if it dries and it's too soon, then it can cause a few problems. And now I've got the inside of the cloak, and I'm going to work on that. I did make sure that it dried properly before I started to make the paper wet, otherwise the fine liner would probably bleed as well. I've made that slightly darker bluey colour because it's underneath. There's no light, well, very little light hitting it, so it's darker than the area by his ears that's a bit darker purple. This is going to be a much darker shadow. Next week I am going to read through the book, so you won't want to miss out on that. Check me out on Amazon, ask for me in bookstores, and if you've written a story yourself, then check out the link I'm going to post below. You might find it very interesting. Thanks for watching. I'm off to stick my hand in a hole to see if a bat lives in there. I will see you next time. No.